These photographs are by Guy Tillam from his Departure series. This was a collection of black and white photographs from disparate locations throughout Africa, shot between places such as Guyana, Kabul, Transkei, and Jerusalem. These photographs are an excellent example of his early work and were taken between the late 80s and 2002. The collection was initially exhibited in 2003 to coincide with simultaneous exhibitions across the country and was accompanied by a publication of the same name. This particular selection of images covers the entire period from Queen's Mercy in South Africa above, shot in 1988, to the Mai Mai militia camp near Ben beneath, which was shot in the DRC in 2002. Though his images are often set amongst the harsh realities of conflict and war, he is seldom confrontational in his approach and prefers to portray the sublime viewpoint of the non-spectacular. The theme in these works is centrally that of journey. Though they also display Tillam's distinctive aesthetic approach, his tendency to turn his lens away from the more sensationalist aspects of the conflict zones he covers, and to portray the nuanced details of everyday life and humanize his subjects through their daily activity, despite the violence of the broader context in which they appear. Tillam has won numerous awards for his photographs, including the Pre-Scam Roger Pick in 2002, the Higashikawa Overseas Photographer Award in Japan in 2003, the 2004 Daimler Chrysler Prize for South African Photography, and the Leica Oscar Barnack Award in 2005. This painting is by a young artist named Kudzanai Chiurai. Originally from Zimbabwe, he studied at the University of Pretoria and now lives in Johannesburg. And his paintings seem to convey to the viewer the psychology and physical experience of inner-city Joburg. As a younger artist, he produced a work entitled Presidential Wallpaper, which effectively depicted Robert Mugabe as a sellout, and ultimately led to his exile from Zimbabwe. He employs photographic transfer in his work, and this picture depicts Siyabonga Ngwakazi, a prominent DJ on the South African youth radio station YFM. Siyabonga was the subject in his Dying to Be Men series, exhibited at the Goodman Gallery, Cape in 2009. This was a series of photographs investigating the aesthetics of propaganda and interrogating the visual legacy of political representation. Here, he honed in on aspects of the image of the black president and his cabinet in particular, and the work's unpacked notions of masculinity and power. This painting took as its point of departure the image from his Dying to Be Men series entitled The Minister of Education, on top of which he has layered various popular cultural icons and political satire. It's refreshing to see his work at auction as, although he isn't terribly established on the secondary market, his work is collected by the likes of Richard Branson and Elton John and hangs in prestigious institutions such as the New York Museum of Modern Art and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. He is also one of the very few South African artists to be selected for Documenta 13, which is in Kassel, Germany later this year.
Peter Clarke is well known as a painter, printmaker, author, and poet. His work often examines the daily lives of people he comes into contact with while exploring various themes. During the late 50s, Clarke made regular trips to Teslastal in the Western Cape. At first he was treated with suspicion, later as a friend, and these visits and the sketches made in situ provided the starting point for much of his work produced from 1956 onwards. Indeed, Clarke returned to these sketches when attending printmaking workshops in the Netherlands and Norway in the early 1960s. Evening Runners, the work shown here, by Peter Clarke, was painted in 1960, shortly after Clarke began to work full-time as a painter. The influence of the 20th century Mexican muralists can clearly be seen in Clarke's rendering of the foreground figures in a bold, naturalistic style, his confident use of line, and the strong contrasting colors employed throughout the composition. Clarke, as artist and observer, has rendered the emotional distance which he experienced between himself and his subject the two-dimensionality of the composition. The three children in the foreground, while standing close to each other, lack the bond or warmth of childhood friends. The silhouetted figures in the background serve as faceless ghosts of previous playtimes. South African history in the 20th century was dominated by apartheid and the social rebellion that took place. One of the most poignant images from this time was the image of Hector Peterson's lifeless body being carried through the streets of Soweto during the 1976 uprisings. Alfred Torber used that photograph as the starting point for his seminal work titled 1976 Riots. Working in large flat planes of colour, Torber introduced elements of texture through the inclusion of thickly applied paint in clearly defined areas. The lifeless body of the child, the rock in the hand of the girl on crutches, the wheels of the tank, the foreground. This use of texture leads the viewer's eyes to areas of importance within the composition, thus adding integrity to his handling of the subject matter. In doing so, Torber has successfully traversed the predictable mantle of an artist working within the naive tradition by elevating his painting to the same level within resistance history that the original photograph has come to symbolize. This work was included in the Market Gallery's exhibition titled 100 Artists Protest Detention Without Trial, held in 1988.
At the age of 45, Irma Stern visited Zanzibar, 1939. She was then at the very height of her physical and mental prowess, and it was an amazing experience for her. She was absolutely overwhelmed by the people, the philosophy of the people, the religion, the food, just everything of Zanzibar captured her imagination, gave her a fantastic boost in her career, took her out of almost a rut, and brought this whole new vision, and she captured it in a period which is undoubtedly her most sought-after period, and produced gems such as this portrait of an elderly Arab. The Zanzibari were as thrilled to have Irma Stern, if one was judged by how she was feted by the Sultan, commissioned to do portraits, and besides the fact that she carried away half of their door and window frames to frame her work in, which didn't quite go down as well, I think both enjoyed her stay in Zanzibar, and this is a remarkable product of that period. She's placed the man very central in the painting, which is rather unusual for Stern, perhaps indicative of the respect she had for him. She's given him that wonderful vision of wisdom. He's seen it all, he knows it all, and he's got answers not to all. A wonderful, wonderful painting to own. The black sculptor Lucas Sithole is best known for these wonderful elongated figures, these sinuous type figures. Quite fabulous, actually, and we're fortunate enough to have 4 on this auction. But the prime lot, and certainly one I'm personally extremely proud of and very excited about, is this Proud and Angry. It really displays Sithole's carving ability and his love for timber, and his choice of the timber to its very, very best. Two-sided, with the back and the front, and possibly reflects the political situation. Think of it in the 60s, early 70s, even 80s, where there was perhaps the frustration and the will to reflect life as an artist should. Superb example. According to Sithole, he actually chose a tree which he wished to make this work out of, but a snake had moved into the tree, a snake with spiritual qualities. So it required that he get the chief's permission that he actually use the wood to do this piece. And he was granted the permission. And in respect to the snake, he's in fact put him on top here. So the snake continues living in the tree in every sense. A wonderful piece, a major, major piece by this highly respected, highly competent South African sculptor. An African Goat by Esrom Lachai. Lachai, like Sithole, started his artistic career at the Polly Street Centre under the admirable eye of Cecil Scottness, who no doubt had a considerable influence on them, but they certainly did their own thing. Lachai favoured modelling and bronze to Sithole's wood carving, and it comes beautifully through in this figure of an African goat. African, undoubtedly, it's got an African mask face, yet the whole posture and anatomy of this goat tells you all about a billy goat. And anybody who knows a billy goat will appreciate the fine eye the artist has communicated in this wonderful figure. Just as a little humorous aside, he's extremely well endowed, as any farmer would require his goat, billy goat, to be, and obviously extremely fertile too, judging by how he's endowed. He was sold by the Goodmill Gallery in 1990, and despite these attributions, nobody trumpeted about them then, as they have recently about a painting, more recently, which was not even remotely as well endowed as the goat. But that's just a little aside. A wonderful figure and a rare piece.